Welcome to the Cardboard Crash Course. My name's Ethan, and today we're learning how to play Disney Villainous by Ravensburger Games. If you don't own Disney Villainous, know that you do not exactly have to have this original green box in order to play, even though this box does have the most amount of villains for the price tag. You actually only need at least an expansion that comes with 2 villains to play against each other. This can be any of the colors of expansion, and you can pick out whatever villains you want the best. With that being said, any villains can be played against each other from any of the expansions, so please feel free to follow along no matter which box you've picked up. Without further ado, let's learn how to set up and play Disney Villainous. Each player will start by selecting which villain they want to play as, and collecting all of the items required to play that villain. We have our villain board, villain deck, our villain's fate deck, a villain mover, as well as the villain's guide that shows you how to best play that villain and how to win. Each player will also want to keep a handy double-sided reference card near them. We'll place our villain board so that it's facing us and place the villain mover on the leftmost location on the villain board. Some villains' rightmost locations also contain a lock icon. If that's the case, we'll place a lock token on that space before doing anything else. We'll shuffle our villain deck and draw 4 cards to start the game with them in front of us. Place the rest of the villain deck off to the left of your villain board. Then shuffle your villain's fate deck and place it to the right of your villain board. You can always look at the cards in your hand, but you may not show them to anyone else. Not that you would want to. Once all the players are set up, place the cauldron with all of the power tokens in it in reach of all players. If your smaller set did not come with an actual plastic cauldron, simply placing the power tokens in the center of the table has the same effect. If you're playing with a 5 or 6 player game, also place the fate token nearby. Since I'm only setting up for 2 players, I'll just place it back in the box. It won't be used for me. Now we'll choose a player to go first. The first player does not begin the game with any power, but the second player starts with 1. If you have a 3rd or 4th player, they each start the game with 2 power. If you have a 5th or 6th player, they each start the game with 3 power. Starting with the first player, we'll go around and around the table, each player taking a single turn at a time until one player has completed their villain's objective. The objective is shown underneath the artwork on your villain's board, and is further explained in your villain guide. These will be intensely helpful to explain how to play your villain and pilot it throughout the game. If you have a moment before the game starts, I heavily suggest reading through the entire booklet. With that being said, let's learn how to play a turn. On our turn, we'll do the following 3 things in order. We'll first move our villain to a new location within our realm. Then we'll perform any actions in those spaces that are uncovered. And then we'll replenish our hand up to 4 cards if we have any less. So let's see that in action. The villain mover moves to a new spot in our villain realm of our choice. Because we're moving from the Forbidden Mountains, we cannot go back to that same spot. We have to go to either the Briar Rose's cottage, the forest, or King Stephen's castle. I'll choose to go to the forest. Each location has symbols representing the actions that you may take when you move there. Any actions that are uncovered by any fate cards, so all 4 in this case, can be performed in any order that you wish. I'll explain later during the fate section, but sometimes fate cards called heroes can cover different spots on your locations. If actions are covered, like these 2 here, you cannot perform them and can only perform the bottom 2 actions like this. Let's use the reference card now to see what each of these actions do. The first action is the gain power action. This always comes with a number inside of it. Because the one that we're performing has a 3, we'll gain 3 power from the cauldron, power being the currency in this game, and place it in our play area. You'll need power later to play cards and activate abilities. The second action we'll see pop up quite often is the play a card action. This allows you to play a card from your hand. You can only play 1 card for each play a card action that you have on your location. Most cards have a cost in the top left corner that is the power that you have to spend in order to play it. So in order to play this Sinister Goon, I must be expending a play a card action as well as spending 2 power. If it is an item or an ally like this one, it's placed into a location on your realm as long as that location is not locked, like we saw with the Jafar one at the beginning of the game. When we play an item or ally, they can go into any of the spots on the bottom of our board. These spots are shown by this little indentation here. It does not have to be the same space that your villain mover is on currently. Item cards usually have an effect that affects the location that they're at, whereas on top of this, allies also have a strength rating in the bottom left corner. Allies are used to defeat heroes at their location, but some of them actually have more powerful abilities than just defeating heroes. You'll have to choose. During the play a card action, you may also have cards in your hand called effects. These do not go on the board like items or allies. Instead, you just pay the cost, in this case you don't have to pay any power, and do the effect. Once that's done, you'll place it in a face-up discard pile next to your villain deck. You also may notice cards called conditions. They are not played with the play a card action like we're explaining here. Instead, they have a certain trigger, and then it will have an effect afterwards. You play it immediately when that happens, on that other player's turn, instead of on yours. Just like effects, these will go to the discard pile when they're finished. Some characters, like Maleficent, will also have a special type of card in their hand, like this curse here. Your villain guide will always explain how these special types of cards work. In this case, it's played like an item and played to a location, after paying its power cost. Some villains, unlike Maleficent, have this action called Activate. Let's look at it now. When you do the action, you'll pick one of the items or allies or other special cards that are played to a location in your realm that have an Activate symbol. They usually have a cost afterwards, but if there is no cost, you'll simply just activate it without paying anything. When you do so, you'll do the effect underneath that Activate symbol. So essentially, every time you perform an Activate action, you can choose to repeat effects on cards you already have played. The next couple of actions you'll see is this one, which is moving an item or ally, as well as this one here, which is moving a hero. They both work pretty similarly. Let's check it out. When moving an item or ally, you'll choose one that is currently at a location in your realm and move it to any adjacent location. If that spot is locked, like Jafar's Cave of Wonders, you may not move it in or out of that locked location. But Maleficent doesn't have any such restrictions. Similarly, the Move a Hero action can move any hero in your realm to an adjacent location. Next up is the Vanquish action, which is something you'll have to take advantage of if you want to advance your villain's objective. This allows you to defeat one hero in your realm that has strength equal to or lesser than all of the allies' combined strength at that same location. You'll choose which of those allies to participate in the Vanquish. Because these sinister goons only have 3 power each and Merryweather is 4 power, you'll need to use both of them in order to vanquish Merryweather. To vanquish the hero, you'll discard any allies that were used into your own discard pile, and then discard that hero into your fate discard pile. Next is the discard cards action, which is a lot stronger than you may think, and let me explain. You discard as many cards as you want out of your hand into your villain's discard pile. Although you do not redraw that many cards immediately, remember that you always at the end of your turn replenish up to 4 cards into your hand. There is no penalty for running out of cards and having to reshuffle your discard pile to form a new deck. Finally, the Fate action, the most interesting one. When you perform this action, you'll first target an opponent that you think needs to be slowed down a little bit. When you do this, you'll draw 2 cards from their Fate deck, not yours, and choose which one to play and which one to discard. These can include effects that take place immediately and are discarded afterwards, items that need to be attached to heroes or can just sit in their realm, or heroes, like Aladdin here. A hero is played to any unlocked location in that person's realm. It covers the top of those boards like we were explaining earlier and slows down their strategy. Fate cards are almost always negative effects for the person you're playing it on. If you're playing in a 5 to 6 player game, you'll also take the Fate token from the last player who is targeted and place it in front of that player that you just targeted. As long as a player has a Fate token, they may not be the target of another Fate action. But again, this is a 2-player game, so this is not in use. Remember, at the end of your turn, after you perform all the actions that you can, draw up to 4 cards into your hand from your villain deck. If your villain deck, or anybody else's Fate deck, ever runs out of cards while you're drawing, simply shuffle the discard pile and continue to draw until you have the number that you need. The game will continue until one player completes their villain's objective, in which case they immediately win the game. Although your objective may not be apparent immediately, As you play the game, you'll see it unfold. And if you've watched the movie that they're in, you'll get a lot of those Easter eggs. Keep in mind that if you have any questions, the Villain Guide is a great resource, as well as the comments section in this video. I'll try to answer as many rules questions as I can, just like I always do. Pax Magnifica, Bellum Gloriosum.